Today I want to show you how you can do testing with DynamoDB Toolbox. So a thing to keep in mind when doing integration testing with any kind of database or shared state is that you want to be able to run those tests in isolation. Otherwise, the different tests could set up data in a way that break other tests, and that would lead to flaky tests that waste a lot of time and just are painful to work with for developers. So in our case, that will mean that we will need to have a different DynamoDB table for every test. This way, we'll know that all the test cases are run in a complete isolation. And currently, in a typical code, you don't have a way to configure the table name in a dynamic way. So let's do some changes that will allow us to do that. First of all, we'll create a function that will create and return this customer entity, but it will take an argument of a table, which means we'll be able to customize the table that the entity is using. So do get customer entity, and then we want to take a table. And here we basically need to do all this. Oops. And we'll use the past table. And for backward compatibility and for just production use, we want to still export the customer here with the default table that will match the same behavior that we had here currently. So that means we just have to call the customer, get customer entity, and we need to pass the my table to it. It doesn't like that I declare the function after calling it. So yeah, so now we have a function that takes a custom table and returns an entity. We can just, for safety, we can verify that everything works exactly the same way as before. That's good. We want to work in small steps. That still doesn't allow us to do testing because we still need a way to customize the table. So we'll do something similar here. So we want to create a function get toolbox table, and that function will take two things. First thing is the table name, and the second thing will be the document client. And both of those are optional. And again, we just want to return this. But for document client, we either want to use the past document client or the document client created here. And we also want to add a name, and we want to either use the past table name, or we want to get the name from the Dynamo SDK to Toolbox the same way we done it before. And get Toolbox table. And then again, we just want to export. We don't want to export this one, but we want to set it up the way it was set up before. So then the customer entity can use it. We actually want to export the function for getting the toolbox table. And again, we can run the code and see that everything works the same way. All right, great. So now we are able to use DynamoDB testing tool and do some testing. So let's do that. So I'm gonna add DynamoDB testing tool. While that's adding, I'm gonna add the customer spec file. Okay, it added. So we'll start with a very simple test, putting and getting a customer. That's what we are testing. So first, we'll need to create an in-memory DynamoDB table with a randomly generated name, and that will avoid collisions and help us achieve the isolation. So we will be calling the this thing here, the create table from the DynamoDB testing tool. To the create table, we need to pass an object as an argument. We need the table definition. So this was our table definition. It's a standard SDK format. And we also want to pass the table name. And in our case, we'll just use a helper from the DynamoDB testing tool to randomly generate a name. And now we want to get a customer entity that uses a Toolbox table configured with that random name and a matching document table. So let's do that. So we want to call the get customer entity that needs a table. So we do get Toolbox table. And here, as the first argument, we'll pass the table name from the table object here. And the second argument is the document client. So now we have the customer entity and we can start using it. So let's say we want to have an item with an ID 123, some company, status active. So this is taken from the example from DynamoDB Toolbox, and date added is a string. And we want to put it. That passes, and now we want to create a get object. So the same ID, the same status, the same date added. I want to do response, await customer, get, item to get, and we want to do some verification. So let's check that the item company equals some company. And we have a pass. So this, as you can see, you can use this to do any kind of testing. You would probably want to play around with the customer entity here, or frequently you still might want to build some kind of a repository on top of your customer entity, and this will allow you to to just do a very nice integration test super quickly. As you can see, the test runs in just 40 milliseconds. So even though you're using like a real DynamoDB API, they are still plenty fast. So, but we didn't really demonstrate that you can run testing in parallel here. Like you could do this test without any extra tooling. You could have just talked with DynamoDB running in the background, maybe in a Docker. So let's try to demonstrate that. We'll first move the setup to a before each block. I think I need async here. So I want this to happen for every test. The customer is something that will have to be available to the functions, the tests. So we can do let customer, and it happens that I know that it's using this type from the DynamoDB Toolbox. But actually, there is a better way to do this. Instead of doing before each, let's create a function that will just return the customer. So get configured entity. here we'll do, actually you can just customer and that. Yes, we need a wait here. All right, and this works now. So now we can do another test. We'll do just a very similar test that would basically demonstrate that there are no collisions. So collisions should not be a problem. And we can copy and paste everything here, async again, and let's just change this to different company. And if we try to put this item to an already existing table, we'll get an error. And we can actually demonstrate this very easily. Like I think we can just okay, so this put actually would overwrite, but if we do const conflicting item, and then you put that one there, then I mean obviously now that we have an error here, but that's exactly what we did in this test, and we didn't get a failure. So yeah, so Wallaby actually does run the tests at the same time, with just running them one after another, but just still run separate files in parallel. So if you had multiple tests that talk to the same database, you would still get random collisions depending on the execution time of different test files. Okay, so that's a quick demonstration. I hope you guys find this pattern useful, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.